2013, President Xi Jinping made a speech entitled Promote People with the People Friendship and Create a Better Future at Kazakhstan's Nazarbayev University. Next slide. And a month later, on October 2nd, President Xi Jinping also delivered a speech to the Indonesian parliament. And this time, I think you can see already Indonesia is playing a fantastic role in this whole event of BRI. Next slide. The thing that the two speeches could summarize basically in a very simple sentence here, which is to revitalize and reinvigorate the ancient land, belt, and maritime road based Silk Roads. Next slide. My friends, I want you to keep this in mind. I'm going to come back later. Imagine, my friends, someday in the 21st century, you can buy a high-speed rail ticket from Surabaya, whose destination is London. Whose destination is London. And I want you to remember that. Now, next slide. It actually is very interesting. In discussing the Belt and Road, there are two historical figures. One is called Zhang Qian. In the Han Dynasty, he died around 114 BC. And about 1,500 years later, another Chinese called Zheng He during the Ming Dynasty. I think these two men basically represented the Belt and Road Initiative from the whole historical perspective. From Zhang Qian, he was sent by the emperor to go far west of China, almost as far as the Caspian Sea. And so this then defines some of the concept of the road part, of the land part of the Belt and Road. And Zheng He, on the other hand, was sent by the emperor, who made trips to all over Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, as you can see, to South Asia, India, and so on, and also Africa and Arab. The reason why he went to Arab, especially he went to Mecca, was because he was actually a Muslim. And so it was an important thing for him to do. Now, this is the ship. This is the defining ship of Zheng He as compared to the one that Christopher Columbus came to North America. You can see already how vast the technology of the Chinese naval in the Ming Dynasty. And so we can think of now Zhang Qian as the belt part of the land-based belt and Zheng He as the maritime-based road. So that's where the Belt and Road comes from. It's interesting that despite that Zheng He went to so many places in Southeast Asia, to India, to South Asia, to Arab and East Africa, he did not bring back to China 1 square inch of colony. And if you compare with the British, who once they have a naval power, they built colonies all over the world. In fact, it says that the sun never sets on the British Empire. In fact, it is not just the Britain, the Dutch did the same. So in fact, you can see the Dutch is also all over the world. And what's happening then is in the Western mindset, building colonies is the way they do business. They come in and actually take over the business of the countries. This is now what I call a Western mindset. I don't want you to think that the Belt and Road is only in terms of Europe and Asia. Actually now, you know that Asia, South America, Latin America is very much part of this Belt and Road initiative. Here's a picture showing that China is making a strong push in the renewables in wind, solar, and hydro in Latin America. However, there are political challenges from 2013 to 2021. This lady, this reporter from the New York Times, wrote an article called How China Got Sri Lanka to Cough Up a Port. And you can tell that from the title of this talk, of this article she wrote, she's not very keen on the BRI. Now, what is this port that she's talking about? Well, it is the Sri Lanka's Hambantota port. It's a huge port that's built by China. Two researchers. One of them is an outstanding researcher called Professor Deborah Browdingen from Johns Hopkins University, and Professor Meg Rittmeyer from Harvard University. They wrote an article after the publishing of the New York Times article. And the title is "The Chinese Debt Trap is a Myth. The narrative wrongfully portrays both Beijing and the developing countries it deals with." And this is you can actually read it. It's a very, very well-written article. Next slide. And I took out some of the things that they said in their article. The following are words from the article. It says that these are their words. The Trump administration pointed to Hambantota to warn of China's strategic use of debt. In 2018, former Vice President Mike Pence called it the debt trap diplomacy, a phrase he used through the last days of the administration and evidence of China's military ambitions. As Michael Odagie, one of the Sri Lanka's greatest chroniclers, once said, in Sri Lanka, a well-told lie is worth 1,000 words. And the debt trap narrative is just that, a lie and a powerful one. These are extraordinarily complex and convoluted geopolitical and geoeconomic situations. It is truly imperative that the world needs to pay meticulous attention on careful and in-depth field research reports, such as those from Professors Browdingen and Rittmeyer. So I want to talk about three possibilities or three visions of the Belt and Road Initiative. One of them is called the supercontinent, which is an amalgamation of East and West. And the second one is neo-Renaissance, which is humanity's possibility to think out of the box, to mitigate existential challenges. And the third is cultural communications, ultimate challenge of Chinese culture. First of all, I want to talk about BRI can realize the mindset of a supercontinent. If you look at the world's map, you can tell pretty much that North America here is a continent. And then South America is a continent. Africa is a continent. And Australia and New Zealand, of course, sort of a continent. But this piece of land here, this gigantic piece of land, all the way from Great Britain and Europe, all the way through to Asia, all the way down to Indonesia, this is sitting on one giant piece of land. And somehow we think of this part as a continent and this part as another continent. And in fact, the whole Western civilization starts around here, and the Eastern civilization starts around here. And today, the whole world civilization is basically based by these two very important civilizations. And the Arabic and Muslim civilization is all coming from this area. I'd like to say a little bit more about Zhang Qian. He was the Chinese official and a diplomat who served as an imperial envoy to the world outside of China in the 2nd century. If you look at Baidu, it has these words about him. He is 第一个睁开眼睛看世界的中国人, and in English, the first Chinese to open his eyes to observe the world. That phrase shocked me because by the time Han Dynasty came around, China already has several millennium of history, and yet he was the very first Chinese to open his eyes to observe the world. My good friend Li Hongfa was a student studying in National Cheng Kung University in civil engineering. And after that, he returned to Malaysia and built a business and became very successful. I often call him the 21st century Zhang Qian, and you will see why in a minute. I like what he told me a lot. In fact, one of the chapters, chapter 5 of my book, is entirely about what he told me. He asked himself a question when he became well-to-do. He said, since Asia and Europe are land-linked, why can't I travel on land from one end to another? So he gathered a group of his friends with their families, and they drove from Singapore through Malaysia, through Thailand, through Laos, into China, into Tajikistan, into Kazakhstan, from Kazakhstan into Russia, and then into Finland, all the way up to northern Finland, came down from northern Finland down to southern Finland, into Sweden, and then into Denmark, from Denmark into Germany, from Germany into Holland, and then they took a boat from Holland to London and eventually flew back. 2 months to do this. He showed me some of these beautiful pictures. This is the Tibet Himalaya mountainside. This is the Tajikistan border with China. This is the Tajikistan and Kazakhstan border. And this is the Kazakhstan and Russia border. When they got to Kazakhstan's Almaty, they were having trouble finding lodgings, finding a hotel. So eventually they found a university where they gave them rooms to stay in. And here's what he said. We were glad not because we found a place to rest, but because we were able to meet and interact properly with many students of the university. To our surprise, we discovered many of them came from all corners of the world, from Africa, Europe, and South America. They were all very enthusiastic about the education they received there. They gave us that gives us the first indication that these Central Asian countries were not as remote and as desolate as one would think. Also, in a recent article that my colleague and I wrote, the title of the paper is called From 10 Data Points to Observe U.S.-China Coming Relations. And basically, it shows that the real going from Asia into Europe is enormous. One of the very exciting and interesting things that we did not know, when in year 2020, there were 12,400 scheduled trains going between Asia and Europe. And this is the number of trains going. So you see, in 2011, there were only 17. And by the time it reaches 2020, there were 17,000. Such a vast land-based operation together with the sea-based counterpart have become an unprecedented comprehensive transportation network between Europe and Central Asia, East Asia, and Southeast Asia. It has also proved to be smooth flow of international logistics supply chain. And of course, this is a well-known picture to everyone in the world today. When this happened, this particular land route becomes even more important. Of course, nowadays, people think only in terms of flying. If you fly from Singapore to London, what do you see? Well, you see this beautiful airport of Singapore, which I'm sure some of you may have been to before. And then when you reach London, you see this utilitarian airport, not particularly beautiful, but that's what it is. And when you fly from Singapore to London, you only see those two airports. Nothing in between matters to you because if for all you care, it didn't have to exist. However, if the transportation between Asia and Europe can be of this form and not in the old camel form, with the right politics, infrastructures, therefore can fundamentally alter the mindset of people, can change the mindset of people. And they can happen technologically. Next slide. Because we know that from UK's Dover to France Calais is about 20 miles, which is around 32 kilometers. And you can see that this can be done now. Now, you also know that recently, Hong Kong, Zhuhai, and Macau, which is 55 kilometers, now this bridge is also can be built. over 55 kilometers. We all know that three Asia's most important nations are what we now call islands nations. Two are not connected to Asia continent by land, and one is not connected to Asia continent by politics. Japan is one of them that is not connected to the Asia's land. It has, these are the numbers. It is the third largest GDP country in the world. Next slide. Republic of Korea, by the way, is also sort of an island because no one in Korea can just travel into Asia without flying or take a boat. And it is a big country. And the third is Indonesia. Actually, it's very interesting. We know that Japan is an island, a bunch of islands. But if you look carefully as the difference between South Korea and Japan, you find the following. This is South Korea. This is Japan. In between, there are two islands that's occupied by Japan. This distance is about 20 miles, and this distance is about 20 miles, and this is far less than 20 miles. And from the idea of building bridges or building tunnels, people know how to do that very quickly now, very easily now. Challenges for a link between Japan and Korea, first of all, money. Money is never the issue. It's not that much. A few $1 billion, you can do it. Technology, clearly not an issue either. Japan and South Korea and China are all now technologically powerhouses. Political will, on the other hand, North Korea and South Korea separation cannot be forever. It's going to one day be one nation. So for Japan and South Korea to be real auto-linked to the land of this whole supercontinent between Europe and Asia will change the mindset of people of these countries. So Japan, Korea, North and South, and China could, through this deepened human transportation system, can enhance their mutual cultural communications for the betterment of humanity. The next island nation is Indonesia. It has 17,000 islands. Indonesia's population is about 230 million. Sumatra and Java together has 205 million already. Except for Kalimantan, Indonesia is not connected to any Asian nation by land. If you look carefully at Sumatra and Malaysia, western Malaysia, the closest point between Malacca and Rupat Island is around 20 miles, which is again 32 kilometers. And also at the tip end of Sumatra and Java, it's also 20 miles. So the tunnel between West Malaysia and Sumatra, as well as the bridge between Sumatra and Java, were discussed several years ago. This was even before the Belt and Road Initiative. The physical and political infrastructures between Japan and Korea and between Indonesia and Malaysia will truly allow Indonesians, Japanese, and Koreans to be palpably linked to the land of the supercontinent. While I'm not an economist, I'm very confident that the economic enhancement for Indonesia, Japan, and Korea to be intimately land linked to Asia mainland will be for greater than the amount of funding needed for the construction and maintenance of these infrastructures. Of course, there is no price tag on when people can truly understand and appreciate each other. When all these physical infrastructure transformation is matured, millennium mindset transformation cannot be far behind. And one of them is the mindset of a supercontinent. The second thing I want to talk about is how BRI can realize a neo-Renaissance. We all know that Copernicus, which lived between 1473 and 1543, did the unbelievable work of showing that the Earth is not the center of our solar system, but the sun is. What he did was he basically think out of the box. Renaissance introduced an entire new mindset to confront challenges and ignorance. However, the 21st century, we have severe existential challenges. In 1991, the person who helped President Clinton to become president has a famous line. At that time, he said, "It's the economy, stupid." However, in the 2021, it's the climate change. There is a deeper problem existing between the Eastern and the West. And that is Karen Skinner, who was a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. she was on loan to the US State Department in 2019, said the following. When she talked about the China and US issues, she said, this is not a fight with a really different civilization. This is a fight with a really different civilization and a different ideology, and the United States hasn't had before. I think it is also striking that it's the first time that we will have a great power competitor that is not Caucasian. The comment underscores a deep and profound gulf between Eastern and Western civilizations and in the 21st century. Eastern civilization by itself apparently has not and cannot mitigate these existential challenges. Neither can the Western civilization by itself to mitigate the existential challenges. So in the supercontinent and neo-Renaissance induced by the BRI, we can fuse the East and West civilizations and create a new civilization which will allow humanity a hitherto unknown and untried, think out of the box mindset to mitigate the imminent existential challenge. For BRI to be successful, it must also engage in cultural communications. Next slide. So what is cultural communications? Next slide. I'd like to give you an example. This is what a famous media person in India wrote on January 7, 2010. His name is Manoj Das, and this is the link to it. I urge everyone to find this article to read, but I will just extract a part which I think is very important. He said that, this is all his words. He said, we in India have debated as much as Asian countries have about issues like the desirability of Western influence on our culture, its inevitability or otherwise, and the relation between tradition and modernity. Like the May 4th movement, 五四运动 in China, which championed Western values and ideals in the 1920s, we too, we meaning India, too had voices against our traditions, and they were given a reasonable hearing. An exchange of experience of this kind would no doubt be highly educative. Next slide. For quite some time, Indian literature for the common Englishman meant what Rudyard Kipling and the like wrote. For long, India's window, as well as that of the West on Chinese life, has been Pearl S. Buck's Good Earth. Pearl S. Buck is a very famous author who wrote a book about China. But then he said, but when I read Lu Xun, a number of his short stories, including The True Story of RQ, I realized that despite the realism of the works of Pearl Buck and other gifted writers, Lu Xun's work had an authenticity that could be expected only of a native of China. I do not propose to display my meager knowledge of Chinese literature here. This is what Manoj Das says. But what I propose is a strong and well-planned academy of Asian literatures to take care of the great need to know one another. By the way, Asian literature could easily include Indonesian literature as well. Next slide. And he said, and who could take any effective step in that direction? For me, the answer came from the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. Speaking to Mr. Prof Feng of the Central News Agency, he said on January 20th, 1946, next slide, if China and India hold together, the future of Asia is assured. The holding together, he continues, need not be confined to diplomacy. It can by all means be a psychological force that can work wonders in the realms of creativity. When I read this for the first time in 2001, I fell off my chair. I asked myself, you might be asking, who is Prof Feng? Next slide. Well, it happens to be my father, Prof Feng. Next slide. In fact, this is a picture of me, and I was still a baby then, in the mausoleum of Sun Yat-sen's. And you can see the more modern day picture. The only difference between these two mausoleums is that the tree has grown bigger. Suddenly, cultural communications become personal to me. The great need to know one another. That's what Manoj Das says. For humanity's future is real to me now after reading Manoj Das. Cultural communications between individuals, between nations, between civilizations are the key to humanity's future, especially today's extraordinarily complex and convoluted world. Next slide. Famous poet of Britain, Rudyard Kipling, once said that, oh, East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. Yet the ultimate take for the BRI is that the East and West shall merge together. Next slide. For humanity's common future, today China needs millions and millions of Chinese to open their eyes and see the world. The ancient Silk Roads grew organically. Next slide. China's Zhong means central. Next slide. There was no requirement or incentive for the Chinese for millenniums to understand other cultures and civilizations, including Indonesians. This rendered China an inward-looking country. But today, the world is fundamentally altered. The BRI was created entirely by China. With this creation, it places unprecedented demands on China. Next slide. For the Chinese, it needs a comprehensive understanding of other people's cultures and, most of all, other people's mindsets. The BRI success cannot merely be a Chinese success. This is the essence of the Millennium transformation. And BRI is one to bring about this transformation. And for the 21st century, it should not just be if China and India hold together, the future is assured. It must be, if the BRI were to be successful, it must also include the 10 Asian nations, ASEAN nations. Only then the future of the world. Therefore, my friends, imagine someday in the 21st century, you can buy a high-speed rail ticket from Surabaya, whose destination is London. That's why I think this is an important one, and BRI must be a success of humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof Feng. It is an inspiring speech about your book, and we do believe that when Professor Parakana wrote about the future is ASEAN, you mentioned that without 10 ASEAN countries, the future of Asia will not happen. I think that's a wonderful conclusion, I think. And
actually, I have this. I added something, but because my video did not work,
yes,
that didn't come. Let me tell you, I added 2 more slides in there that I couldn't show now.
Yes,
and they are in 1955. There was a Bandung conference.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you know.
ASEAN African Conference.
That's right. It was one of the conferences of the so-called Third World at that time.
Yes.
And the non-alignment. But Indonesia played an important role. President Sukarno was the organizer of that conference. And yet in the 21st century now, and it actually at that time, there is another conflict that's going on almost entirely in Southeast Asia, and that's called the Domino Theory. And
yeah.
That is the communists is going to come to Vietnam, then Thailand, then to Malaysia, and down to Indonesia, and so on. And behind that, of course, is the United States, and of course, on the other one is China. But today, United States and China is again entering an uncomfortable relationship. It is between Wall Street and Shanghai's modern city. And so I think that the entire Southeast Asia, this large country called Indonesia, must play a fundamental role in the 21st century. And for Indonesia to play a fundamental role in the 21st century, higher education, such as your university and many others, including the Bandung Institute of Technology and so on, must play a role that you may not have thought of until now. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof Feng. Please give big applause to Prof Feng. Wonderful speech. Right now, I would like to give an opportunity to our discussions. The first one is the chairman of Chamber of Commerce of East Java for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then later on, our vice rector for information, digitalization, and also internationalization, Dr. Muhammad Miftahul Surur. And finally is Dr. Dimas Oki Nugroho for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then after that, we will have a Q&A for about 30 minutes.
Okay.
So first of all, I would like to give an opportunity to Bapak Atik Dwi Putranto, who is the chairman of Chamber of Commerce East Java. Please, Pak Atik. Monggo, Pak Atik.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Yang terhormat Prof Badri Munir, yang terhormat Prof Daswang Feng, Bapak Dimas Oki, Bapak Dr. Muhammad Miftahul Surur, Mr. Mark Govert, dan Mr. Gujing Si. Pertama-tama tentunya izinkan kami mengucapkan banyak-banyak terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan kepada saya selaku Ketua Umum Kadin Jawa Timur untuk ikut menyumbangkan aspirasi dalam acara book launching China Millennium Transformation The Belt of Road Initiative. Tentunya sebagai Ketua Kadin, membaca buku tersebut adalah pengalaman yang sangat menyenangkan sekali, sebab dari sana saya bisa melihat sebuah harapan baru bagi hubungan dagang yang saling menguntungkan antara China dan provinsi di Jawa Timur khususnya. Dalam membaca buku tersebut, saya melihat Prof. Dr. Daswang Feng sebagai pihak di luar Cina yang memahami dan dapat menyeberangkan ide pemerintah Cina kepada kita semua yang tidak dibesarkan dalam budaya Cina sehingga memahami konsep-konsep pemikirannya. Ide dari penulisan ini lahir dari inisiatif yang dikemukakan oleh Presiden Republik China yang saat itu dikenal dengan sebagai Belt of Road Initiative. Ide utama dari Belt Road Initiative yang dilakukan oleh Presiden Xi Jinping adalah membangun kerjasama antara bangsa demi kebaikan seluruh umat manusia. Sebagai ide tentunya harus diterjemahkan dalam konsep-konsep yang dapat dimengerti, disusun bersama sebagai sebuah strategi dan konstruksi sebagai sebuah proyek yang realistis. Oleh karena itu, buku ini adalah sebuah langkah awal untuk menuju pemahaman bersama langkah-langkah apakah yang harus diambil dalam kerjasama antar bangsa. Prof. Daswang Feng menginterpretasikan ide Presiden Xi Jinping di dalam 3 pokok bahasan. 1, di dunia sebagai sebuah superkontinen, di dalamnya tinggal berbagai bangsa yang seharusnya dapat saling bekerja sama, saling satu sama lain dengan jumlah perbedaan yang lahir karena memang jarak geografis yang begitu jauh membuat umat manusia menjadi saling asing. Komunikasi dan saling pemahaman budaya lebih menjadi sebuah keharusan bila mana umat manusia ingin bekerja sama untuk membangun manfaat bersama. Oleh karena itu, diusulkan oleh Profesor Daswang Feng agar transportasi khususnya darat atau laut menjadi sasaran penghubung utama wilayah di dunia dan mereka memberikan kesempatan kepada umat manusia untuk dapat berinteraksi dan saling bertukar pikiran. Jadi memang transportasi darat Karena transportasi darat itu pasti ada mampir-mampirnya. Baik transportasi darat dan laut pasti ada mampir-mampirnya, berhenti-berhentinya di setiap stasiun. Nah, itu yang akan kita harapkan, yang diharapkan akan terjadi interaksi, baik interaksi sosial dan interaksi budaya. Begitu juga dengan transportasi laut. Beda dengan transportasi udara yang langsung melewati beberapa negara, sehingga interaksi ini sangat jarang. Yang pokok kedua dalam pembahasan ini adalah New Renaissance sebagai sebuah gerakan para intelektual di mana perguruan tinggi untuk mengajarkan kepada generasi penerus agar mereka pada zamannya dapat berkontribusi bagi pembangunan umat manusia. Ide New Renaissance lahir dari pengalaman di masa lalu pada zaman Renaissance, bahwa dalam waktu sekejap setelah meninggalnya abad ke-8, umat manusia dapat mengalami kemajuan pesat karena ilmuannya mau bekerja sama dan membangun ilmu pengetahuan dari kontribusi yang telah diberikan oleh para seniornya. Neo-Renaissance juga diartikan sebuah kontribusi bersama ilmu pengetahuan berbasis pendekatan metode Barat dan Timur. Saya yakin para ilmuwan yang hadir pada acara ini dapat memahami bagaimana state of art dapat menjadi modal utama bagi para ilmuwan untuk secara bersama-sama membangun komunikasi akademis demi pengembangan pengetahuan yang bermanfaat bagi umat manusia. Dan yang ketiga adalah kultur komunikasi atau komunikasi budaya. Sebagaimana kita ketahui bersama, China sebagai sebuah negara amat jarang berinisiatif untuk membuka diri. Membuka diri yang dimaksud di sini adalah saling memahami latar belakang dan budaya masing-masing bangsa dan negara. Sehingga proses kerjasama dalam bentuk apapun diharapkan akan menjadi lebih baik dan lebih lancar. Dalam buku tercatat bahwa pada masa dinasti Han sekitar abad 2 Masehi, ada seorang diplomat dari negeri Cina yang berinisiatif membangun hubungan dagang antara Asia Barat, sehingga saat ini kita bersama-sama dikenali sebagai Silk Road. Hubungan dagang pada umumnya senantiasa diikuti oleh pertukaran pemahaman budaya. Pada pidatonya di depan Parlemen Republik Indonesia pada tahun 2013, Presiden RRC Xi Jinping juga menyebutkan tokoh yang kita kenali sebagai Laksamana Cheng Hu yang hidup pada masa dinasti Ming abad 15 melakukan perjalanan ke banyak penjuru dunia. Jejaknya masih dapat kita lihat ini pada kita kunjungi di kota-kota di Jawa Tengah maupun di Jawa Timur, khususnya di kota Semarang dan Lasem di Jawa Tengah. Bila inisiatif pertama dan kedua memiliki rentang waktu 13 abad, maka adalah sebuah keistimewaan jika abad ke-21 ini pemerintah China kembali mengemukakan inisiatifnya untuk membuka diri dan membangun hubungan budaya dengan bangsa lain, seperti yang dikemukakan oleh Profesor Prof Feng. Keadaan ini tantangan utama adalah pihak pemerintah China, terutama untuk mempertahankan dua kebudayaan yang berbeda, tercipta saling pemahaman dan kerjasama yang dirasakan bermanfaat bagi kedua belah pihak. Sejauh ini inisiatif tampak telah dilakukan oleh pemerintah China, namun sebagaimana yang kita ketahui, budaya ada hal yang mendasar bagi umat manusia. Terbentuk sejak masa-masa formatif seorang individu, sehingga jalan menuju saling memahami adalah perjalanan yang panjang dan harus diupayakan dengan sungguh-sungguh oleh kedua belah pihak. Selanjutnya, sebagai Ketua Kadin, izinkan saya mengemukakan beberapa hal terkait dengan dalam diskusi ini terkait dengan hal dan konsep Bill of Root Initiative. Bill and Root Initiative adalah sebuah ide yang cemerlang dan kami menyambut baik ide tersebut. Namun demikian pelaksanaan ide tersebut pada tingkat implementasinya adalah sebuah tantangan yang tidak ringan, yang cukup berat. Tentunya ini harus melakukan edukasi dan promosi yang harus dilakukan secara masif dan sistematif guna untuk mempercepat apa yang dimaksud dengan ide-ide itu bisa dilaksanakan dengan baik. Dan tentunya membutuhkan komitmen di antara negara-negara dan bangsa yang terlibat di dalamnya. Komitmen, itikat baik, dan konsistensi dari pemerintah China, para pengusaha Cina, dan rakyat dibutuhkan sekali dalam proses ini. Bagi kami selaku Ketua Umum Kadin Jawa Timur, langkah pertama yang kami tunggu adalah inisiatif pihak pemerintah China untuk melakukan komunikasi dengan intensif dengan Kadin di Indonesia, khususnya Kadin Jawa Timur. Dalam waktu dekat ini, setidaknya di situ kami akan menilai kesungguhan dan komitmen awal pihak negara China dalam menjalankan ide besar yang diinisiasi oleh Presiden Xi Jinping ini. Ini adalah langkah awal yang pertama yang kami akan selalu tunggu. Karena memang seperti yang saya katakan tadi atau seperti yang ada di buku ini bahwa tidaklah mudah untuk membuka budaya, karena memang dulu seperti kalau di zaman Jepang itu kan ada zaman Jepang, orang Jepang menilai bahwa matahari dari timur ini saya yang paling bagus di dunia ini itu di Jepang. Begitu juga menurut saya di China juga seperti itu, mungkin di Barat juga seperti itu, sehingga perlu betul-betul komunikasi yang intensif terkait dengan baik budaya maupun yang lain-lainnya. Izinkan saya menutup pendapat saya ini dengan mengucapkan selamat dan terima kasih kepada Prof Feng yang telah membuat karya tulis yang sangat baik dan bermanfaat bagi umat manusia. Sekalipun jalan masih panjang ataupun pendek untuk menuju ke sebuah proyek yang realistis, buku ini menjadi pembuka pikiran bagi pembaca tidak dibesarkan dalam budaya Cina untuk memahami inisiatif yang telah dilakukan oleh pemerintah China. Namun sekalipun di Indonesia dan Jawa Timur pada khususnya banyak diaspora atau keturunan Tionghoa, namun tidak dapat dipungkiri rentang waktu panjang pendek nenek moyang meninggalan dataran Cina dan jarak geografis pemerintah jauh menciptakan perkembangan budaya yang baru, yang berbeda dan unik, yang juga harus dijembatani melalui komunikasi budaya yang baru. Sekali lagi kami ucapkan terima kasih kepada Prof Feng dan Universitas Erlangga, Sekolah Pasca Sarjana Universitas Erlangga yang telah menyelenggarakan acara ini. Kiranya keberhasilan komunikasi dan kerjasama yang baik akan terbangun di antara kita semua, perkembangan kebaikan umat manusia. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih. Thank you, Prof Feng. Okay, next one will be the Vice Rector of Universitas Erlangga, Dr. Muhammad Mintaku Surur. He will be delivered his discussion.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank
you very much, Professor Batri. Good afternoon, Professor Feng. It is my pleasure to become one of the discussants for your book. Very interesting because although I never come to China, but I felt the influence of recent China all over the world. I think so why this book is very important. And during my PhD degree in Japan in around 3 years ago, although in Japan, they are really afraid, really afraid about China. They are, I'm sorry, probably the word with the traditional enemy. So I'm very interesting with this book. The first I want to discuss about the theme about why this book talk a lot about the Belt and the Road Initiative. However, we know the recent word is the without border, you know. It's not physically, it's not about physics. We connected each other with many things, with the internet and many, for example, factory or many business. It's not important where they build, but however, the business still provide in all of the world. So I'm wondering, the first I'm heard about the Belt and Road Initiative concept. I believe it is seems like physics reunion, It seems like probably 20 or several years ago, the Chinese government feel they have the success with the Belt and Road Initiative. However, after that, they try to make step for reunion, physics reunion. So I'm really need to hear your opinion about it. Why we still need the about the physics connections? Why about the physics connection? We still have the without border in the all over the world. And number second, as you mentioned in your slide, that although the United Kingdom, British company, although the Dutch, they had make the stations in several important countries to make connection all over the world. However, the Belt and Road Initiative is only part of the world, probably less than 25%. Although probably they are really have the power for economic, for example, India and also Indonesia. Why, if it is not reunion, as I discussed in the first opinion, the first questions, why it is very important? Why not for example, not Pacific Belt, for example, Pacific Belt during US, China, and also including Southeast Asia, and also the important country, for example, Pacific Belt and also Silk Road, for example, like that. It is more wide and also important. Is it the influence? Is there any another goal that, for example, to make a weak, for example, China want to find a more compatriot country against the US, for example. For example, I just try to think about the lateral thinking. And also the most interesting is the India. You write in your book, although more 30 pages about them. And I'm very happy and I'm very agree with you about with the sentence, China is the moon of the India and India is the moon of the China. It is very exactly sentence. Although I'm living in India only 4 months, however, I'm living in the Houston, that in the Houston, many Indians and many China, many Chinese, they are making competitions. And they are very smart and very hard work rather than me, although, and they are very powerful and strong. However, I need the prediction. How about the future prediction? You show the strengthness of the India. They are CEO and also they are very powerful in educations and also globalization industries. But I think China with the, not only about the military, but also economics, they have a powerful, more powerful to push probably the company or the nations that the business with the China have also included the Chinese in their inside. And also I know also several Chinese is also have important positions, although in the Western company. And the last, I'm very interesting about Vietnam. You only write in 3 pages, although I'm living in Vietnam in 4 months, and I'm very afraid actually when I see their speed, their low salary, and also very maybe really hard worker, although than Thai and also Indonesia. And we know in the history, Vietnam is also, the land is never become a colony by China. They also their history, and they had, I think, they had a special power to become a big country. I'm sorry. And the last about, recently China is one of country succeed their vaccine. They product a vaccine, and I try read development of the public health in China from 1949 to 2019, and they had like the failure of reforms of the healthcare reforms in China during 1980 to 1990. However, we know recently China make announcement about Healthy China 2030. I'm a medical doctor, and I'm very interesting because we know that China had a very good opportunity about the number of the populations, number one, and the second, very good rules for some developing medicine, some, for example, about transplant, about their traditional medicine, or etc. How your opinion, Professor, about the healthcare reforms of China in 2030 and how the impact for the world, especially Indonesia. I'm sorry if longer than the expectation, Professor Badri. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm really proud and give the congratulations to Professor Feng. It is very interesting and very good book, and give us maybe the more 10, 20 years jump of our vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Rector, Dr. Muhammad Miftahul Surur, for your insightful discussion for Professor Feng's book. Next one is...
He's a medical doctor?
Yes, he's a medical doctor, Professor Feng. He was trained in Houston and also in India doing a research. So when you say China as the moon and also India as the moon, and then we understand the situation. Okay, next one. Mas Don, Dr. Dimas Oki Nugroho, the Special Staff for Ministry of Economics of Republic of Indonesia. Please, time is yours, Mas Don.
Thank you. Prof Badri, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm very happy to be invited here for having me in this very fruitful and useful discussion. I should say hi for Professor Daswan Feng. I read the book. Some chapters I have highlighted, and I think it's very timely and useful for Indonesia and for many scholars and for policymakers of the government to read this book and to see the connection between China's development and Indonesian current development. Is it okay? You can?
Yeah.
Right.
I can hear very well.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Well, I just want to read, first of all, about the Belt and Road Initiative, quick facts that has a connection to Indonesian recent development. 2019 Singapore Business Federation and PricewaterhouseCoopers report ranks Indonesia third among 17 countries with the most promising opportunities along the Belt and Road. So, and then China's investment in Indonesia has surged over the past few years, growing over 0.3 billion in 2013 to 5.5 billion in US dollar in 2017. More recent trends are also encouraging. Indonesia attract 3.6 billion US dollar in Chinese FDI in the first half of 2019, up from 2.4 billion US dollar over the same period last year. More than 18% of this investment are in infrastructure, energy, and logistic projects.
So the COVID-19 didn't stop it.
Well, actually, it seems not stop it. Don't stop it.
Very good.
Very good. It seems good. And yeah, I will explain more about it. And eager to further strengthen FDI inflows from China, in April 2019, the two countries, Indonesia and China, has signed 23 MOU worth 14.2 billion US dollar to jointly develop a range of infrastructure, energy, and industrial estate projects across Indonesia. And Indonesia and China have also agreed to set up a special low-interest fund to boost China's investment in Indonesia. As long as I am concerned about your book, this is a very nice book, and I love this book, Dr. Feng, China's Millennium Transformation, because it is not only cover about the substance of the BRI itself, but also you explain about the process, the soft power, the hard power of BRI and the soft power of BRI, according to your experience, your individual experience, and it makes audience and readers more understand about the topics. And there's a connection between the writer, which is you, and the reader, like me, not which don't have any backgrounds on China's traditional, history, but there's empathy, and I can imagine that actually that's the human needs and human works. So you said 3 major successful outcomes of the implementation of BRI that Dr. Feng has proposed through this book is, first of all, the formation of a supercontinent mindset. And second, the creation of a new renaissance. And third, the so-called cultural communication pace with the outside world. And it's supported by BRI, and they have a tremendous impact to the humanity. And I see your book is very comprehensive. While when you start the discussions from the topics of higher education and the connections of the intellectuals, of the common sense, of the prosperity of the humanity goals, which be the objective of the human development, let's say. And there's a significance of and the urgent needs to globalize of higher education, you said in the page 28. And well, we know higher education here in Indonesia is growing. And actually a lot of students and younger generations, they want to enter university, and they think not only about how to be developed in university life, but also after and the post-university life, what they can do for work, for job. And now recently that we know when the so-called formation of the supercontinent mindsets, that transportations also, link everybody in the cities, but not only in the cities, but also, in the countries like Southeast Asia. Now people is thinking they are in connection with each others. And we know in the situation of the urgent need of the higher education's improvement, quality improvement. So we need more and more cooperations. And I think the experience of Dr. Feng is very crucial for us, not only for the country, but specifically for the lectures, for the universities, people like Professor Badri, like me, and everybody in the university. They have to think that if you talk about science, if you talk about new findings, if you talk about a prosperity and a progressive research project in order to develop and to improve humanity level of prosperity, then it is China that we need to learn more, and to think that the formations of the mindset, the common mindset, that we need more progressive development, not only for this country, for Indonesia, but also for these regions. It is very, very significant and relevant. Well, I have some notes also that I tracked major collaboration between Chinese and Indonesian companies recently. Renewable energy, and we have Power Constructions Corporation of China's Indonesia in Kayan's hydro energy, and We have a transportation corporations, China Railway Group, with the Kereta Api Indonesia. And also we have agro industry. And also we have IT and technology. And we have a finance and insurance corporations, and also metals by Shanghai Edition Investment Group and Indonesia Bintang 8 Mineral. Well, I would like to say in my conclusions, Prof. Badri and Professor Feng, that now we see that there's a growing cooperations in business, in industry between Indonesia and China. But we really need to look forward that there's a growing cooperations in research in, at the university level, on the education as well. Because as Professor Feng said in his book, that there is a very crucial need, there is an urgent need in order to globalize the idea and the knowledge, the common knowledge and the common understanding to be our common mindset. And I think this is also the but the challenge for BRI in terms of social, cultural, and political issues. So we need a common understanding and common mindset to see how the progress goes. And as long as we talk about the prosperity and we talk about the progress of the humanity, also including wealth of the nations of the between Indonesia and China as well, that we need I believe that there will be a process improve. But again, as Dr. Feng said, that the communication is very crucial. So there's cultural communications that need to be increased, need to be met between not only between the government of China and the government of Indonesia and any government in Southeast Asia, but also you should have like a vernacular communications.
That's right. So
vernacular communications according to the same needs and the same level, not same level, but same knowledge of understanding. So I think it can be achieved by educations, corporations, and among others by specifically through the university cooperations, between Indonesia and China educations, higher educations. So thank you very much for Badri and Professor Feng. So it's nice to listen more the discussions, about this book. I think we are now hopefully in the right trajectory of the prosperity. This is the time of Asia, represented by China, and also by the regions. We see, not only China, but Southeast Asia, India. We are in the same, Korea. We are in the same level of the will, same will of dignity, prosperity, and harmony. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Terima kasih.
God bless you too.
Thank you, Dr. Dimas Oki Nugroho. He is our special lecturer at our postgraduate school at Lanka University, Professor Feng. Before we continue we give a big applause to Dr. Dimas Oki Nugroho. Professor Feng, before we continue for Q&A, I think you want to give some feedbacks to all of your discussions.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the three gentlemen for their. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. It's quite clear.
I want to thank the three gentlemen for their very, very succinct and very comprehensive comments. I think what they have discussed and what they have raised, we can probably go on for the next 3 days in the discussions, which we obviously cannot.
Yes.
I would like to pick a few things that was mentioned. I think the second gentleman intrigued me very much, because he's a medical doctor, and healthcare, he thought very carefully about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I happen to be very much involved in a particular project that, if you think of it in a broader sense, it could be very important, not just for China, but in fact for Indonesia and for the world. About 20 years ago, I became on the board of a small company in Boston. And what they do is specifically using MRIs, which I'm sure you know what it is, MRIs to detect breast cancer. Now, you might say that, well, every hospital is doing that now. This company is doing something very specifically. One of the ways to decrease the so-called mortality rate of breast cancer is early detection. There's no other ways. That's the only way. And there are 3 ways of detecting or screening breast cancer. One is to use the X-ray, what is called mammogram. The other one is ultrasound. And the third one is MRI. The first 2 are the common usage. I'm sure that's used in Indonesia now. And the problem that is with that is that I'm not a physician. This is what experts told me, that Asian women, because they have dense breasts, tend to be, these 2 ways of detecting it tend to be not effective. And therefore, by the time you detected the cancer, it's usually late. And therefore, the mortality is very high. In fact, if you look at Indonesia, I'm sure that the mortality rate is pretty high right now. So the MRI, what they have done is now in the last 10 years, they have developed MRI plus big data, using a lot of the data they have accumulated, plus the 5Gs and so on. They can in fact reduce the price of an MRI screening from about $1,000 to within $200. So what that happens is that MRI now is going to be broadly used throughout China. The first test will be Sichuan province, which has about 80 million people. So 40 million women. Anyway, what I'm saying is China now is using this opportunity to vastly transform the healthcare for the people. There's no such thing as a strong country with a weak healthcare. And therefore, I thought that's something that Indonesia and China can work together because of the type of breast structure of Indonesian women with that of the Chinese women. The second comment I would like to make is the very last comment, the last person, talk about higher education. I gave a talk once in Malaysia where I have a sentence, I say that the higher education is the pulse of a nation. When the pulse is strong, so is the nation. And of course, if the pulse is weak, so is the nation. And therefore, higher education is very, very important. And one needs to really seriously think about how Indonesia, that is now on the upswing of higher education, not to get into blind alleys. Because once you get into blind alleys, it's very difficult to get out of the blind alleys. I think if you look around many world situations, there are many, many higher educations that ran into that sort of situation. So I think that that's another area that I think with the Belt and Road Initiative that there can be more. You know, ultimately, I encourage my Chinese friends to understand, for example, India. But I think they also need to understand Indonesia. And therefore, creating centers such as to understand the history, mutual history, the way that people behave, the way that you think, I think that would be something that's good for humanity in the 21st century. Finally, I would like to say, we are facing something very serious now. You know, there is a very famous professor in Harvard University. His name is Graham Allison. You may have heard of him. He wrote a book that talked about the Thucydides trap, which is when you have one big power and another power growing. And he looked at all the Western societies in history. Inevitably, the two countries will engage in war. And I said that if you actually think about the difference between the United States and China of today, there are two things that the history that was discussed before that didn't have today. Number one, these two are nuclear power countries. They can destroy the earth over and over again. Secondly, these are the two countries that have a completely different culture, and they don't understand each other. And that is why cultural communications is important. But in that case, I think countries such as Indonesia, that was colonized by a Western country for a long time, actually have a deep understanding of Western civilization as well as Asian civilization. You are already the melting point of the two civilizations, and you can take this and assist the big countries to learn about each other in a very profound manner. So
brilliant, Professor Feng.
I think that, you know, in many ways, India has the same problem. It has 500 years of the British colonies, and you have several hundred, and because of the colony, you have understood far more about the Western countries than many other countries. For sure, China is very weak in that because China was never colonized. And therefore, they can only think internally by itself. And there is, and at the end of my speech, I say, there was no necessity for Chinese to think about outside world. And therefore, countries like yours can become a driving force for the creation of these merger of civilizations.
Very nice. Very nice.
Thank you, Professor Feng. There are 3 questions right now.
Okay, please.
Raised in chat room regarding your prediction about China and USA.
Oh.
Do you think the tension between these two countries under the new president of the United States, as well as President Xi Jinping, remain high or will be low? And then another one is how can...
Let me answer this first.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't remember.
Okay.
First of all, I don't think I have a good answer. So to put that first, okay?
Okay.
And there is a very famous baseball player in the United States who said that predictions is hard because it's about the future. Okay. I think, as I said, my gut feeling is that, in fact, at the end of my book, I also have mentioned that because United States and China now, the conflict between these two countries, as opposed to all the examples of one strong country and a rising power, there's one big difference. is that both countries are nuclear power countries. When you have nuclear power, you simply cannot have war, period. You cannot have war. So that in itself, the problem, therefore, is very important for people to understand that. And secondly, I think that we have bigger problems because we have climate change. We have all these issues. Climate change is no country can solve by itself. Indonesia cannot solve the climate change by itself. United States cannot solve the climate change by itself. China cannot solve the climate change because climate carries no passport. Climate just goes wherever it wants to go. And therefore, to understand the importance that the human beings are facing this existential challenge, it is important that the world simply have to do. So my answer to the question that was asked, I think is a great question because it's now we're almost confronted by it every day. But I think that again, the whole world through the United Nations must constantly talk about what are the existential challenges we have today. It is no longer just the commerce, and it's not military, it's the climate change. And therefore, I think that universities and companies and countries should all talk about that and find ways for us to fight the climate change problem. You know, many of the Pacific Island countries and some of your islands in Indonesia may be disappearing in the next 20, 30 years. And how are you going to handle that? You cannot handle it by yourself. You have to handle, the whole world will have to come together. And therefore, it is very important for countries like Indonesia to play a role here, especially when you have 17,000 islands.
Okay. Next one, Prof Feng. What should European countries and Indonesia respond on this tension, especially for UK? For example, I think the third discussion, Dr. Dimas Okinugroho mentioned that. What should Indonesia do about that? The question is raised by the legislator member, Professor.
Okay. Well, as I said, in 1955, the Bandung Conference shows that Indonesia played a very important role in the world. And quite recently, Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong,
yes,
he said something. He basically said the following. He said, Singapore will not join any alliance without the presence of China. In other words, Singapore does not want to take sides at the moment.
Okay.
I think right now it is more important that big countries like Indonesia play a fundamental role in telling the big powers that we have a common enemy, and the common enemy is called climate change. We need to solve the problem. Indonesia has 17,000 islands. Many of them will go under the water if we don't do something about it. And so I think that Europe will have to, you know, one thing that Indonesia can do, perhaps, you can organize the 21st century Bandung Conference and discuss these things so that these big countries can feel that they are actually have to listen to you. At the moment, the big countries feel that you need to listen to them. But I think you need to set up, Indonesia is big enough that it can actually pursue this kind of actions.
Okay, thank you, Professor Feng. And another one, so it means that Indonesia should play the role as like in 1955 by proposing about the world's agenda,
right.
climate change.
That's right.
Another one is, of course, China right now recover their economy quite fast and the highest than before. And then what should we do for Indonesia in order to maximize this recovery in terms of economy, and also especially for Indonesia and UK. I think the legislator, Mrs. Agatha Retnosari, is from the ruling party also. So I think she is specialized in Indonesia and Europe relationship. Maybe if you have any replies of her question, I think it will be great.
Well, I will be too presumptuous to tell a senior member of the Indonesian government how to run the country. However, let me just tell you my humble opinion, and this is strictly my humble opinion, and it may not work. My feeling is countries like Indonesia that has had 300 years of colonization and now is stepping out into the world in showing that it is they're asking the world to understand Indonesia, especially from the European countries, how to look at Indonesia in terms of understanding the world's future. I think that Indonesia should be the one that's telling the Europeans, the Americans, and China, for that matter, that the rest of the world are very concerned about our future, and that Indonesia, as one of the leading non-aligned countries, should tell the world that we need to all get together and work together. Once again, like I said, I would strongly encourage Indonesia to organize a well-defined this century's Bandung Conference, so that people can come to Indonesia and understand the mindset of Southeast Asia.
Okay. Thank you, Prof Feng. Next question is from our student discussing about Chinese investment in Indonesia. What do you think that China should invest in Indonesia regarding Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, if I can decide, okay,
yes,
what
yeah.
China can, I will decide that China should invest in working with Indonesia's universities in a collaborative way, because what Indonesia needs will be the talent of the 21st century. And since Chinese universities are growing so rapidly right now, they can actually assist Indonesians' higher education in transforming the mindset of the young people and training the talents of Indonesia. You know, when I was in National Cheng Kung University that you were, yes. I don't know whether you know this part of the history. In 1950, a university in the United States called Purdue University,
yes,
decided to work with Cheng Kung University.
Okay. Yeah, I know that.
And some people came to Cheng Kung University, and they even brought their secretaries to Cheng Kung University, and then brought a lot of the faculties to Purdue. And the reason why Cheng Kung University eventually became one of the top universities in Taiwan was simply because of what universities in what Purdue did for Taiwan, for Cheng Kung University.
Okay.
My suggestion is that China's top universities could then select a university in Indonesia and work closely with you and bring up not just technology, but the mindset and the understanding of culture between the two countries, so that Indonesia can move even faster than it is today. That, I would think, would be the best investment China can make. Now, of course, China would want to build high-speed rail and all that stuff. By the way, I do think, by the way, that it would be good if some Indonesian leaders and Malaysian leaders can think about building the tunnel between Malaysia and Indonesia. I think that once you can travel on land into Malaysia, you will find how people change their mindset very quickly. And then since the rail now is going through Malaysia into Thailand and into China, very soon already, if the tunnel is built, you can go from Surabaya to Beijing through the rail.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Feng. So you're saying that the best investment for China, for Indonesia, it should be higher education. I think it's duly noted, Professor Feng. Dr. Dimas Okinugroho will say it and then will deliver your opinion to the ministry, coordinating minister of economics, because he is the special staff for him.
Right.
And another one is from Mr. Zainal Arifin, is discussing about how can China is so powerful on exporting the products to the world. And then how can BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, play a role to make China become more powerful?
Well, yeah, I actually like one of the comments made by the Foreign Minister Wang Yi quite recently.
Yes.
When he said, China is not, this is what he said. He said, China is not trying to become #1 in the world. China is trying to make sure that China gets better by itself. In other words, he wants to make sure that the people, the Chinese people, have a better life as time goes on. So I think that's an important point for all countries to think of, rather than always wanting to be #1. And I think this is a very Asian view, in the sense that we don't want to always be, it's the Western view, the Western civilization. When I looked at the Western civilization, by the way, I always find it interesting. When the British have a navy, then they have colonies all over the world.
Yes.
When Dutch have a navy, they have colonies all over the world. German colonies, France colonies, Italy colonies, Portugal colonies, and so on and so forth. And yet Asians, the admiral who went to Indonesia and so on from China never brought back any colonies. So perhaps for us Asians to take other people's colony is simply not in the mindset of Asians. I think that is something that Asians should tell the world, that we are not in that form. We do not behave that way. And therefore, in some sense, sometimes for the Western world, whenever they see a powerful Chinese, the only thing they can think of is China is going to have colonies. Actually, I don't know whether you know this story. In 1868, during the Minji Reformation, the Minji Reformation sent some of his smartest people to Europe and say, tell me how the Europeans become so powerful. And they came back and said that they have 3 things. #1, they all have great universities. The emperor said, we need to have universities. So they built the imperial universities in Japan, which is now Tokyo University, Kyoto University, all the famous ones.
Okay.
And he said the second thing they have is that they have navies. They all have navies. Ah, the Japanese say, we must have navies. So by the time the 20th century came around, the Japanese Navy defeated China, defeated Russia. And the third thing they told the emperor is that they all have colonies. And so the only Asian countries in the world that ever have colonies is Japan. They have Korea and they have Taiwan. In other words, the mindset of the West is to take colonies and to use power to take over, whereas the Asians simply don't think that way. I think Asian countries today should tell the world that we have a different philosophy. We have a different civilizations. We need to come to and together, the world today is facing existential challenges. The Western aggressive way of thinking about the world probably should be changed, and the Asian way of thinking perhaps can come together and solve some of the world's problems.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Feng. The one that I noticed, like, how can Meiji restoration drive from the university? And then just now I checked when is Tokyo established, Tokyo University. 1877.
Yeah, 1877, about a few years after the Reformation.
Oh, and then Kyoto is 1897.
That's right.
Waseda is 1882. Wow.
That's right.
Keio is 1858. That's right. Great.
That's right.
So they start the restoration of Japan, starting from
in some sense, in using today's language, they started to become a knowledge economy.
A knowledge economy. Yes. Thank you. And also, what I noticed, like,
well, actually, there's one more thing.
Yes.
What they learned is that they also saw, the Japanese also noticed that little England or little Great Britain can control India for 500 years.
Yes.
And they realized that, and so they say, well, little Japan can take China as a colony. Now, what they did learn from the British is that the British created a cadre of Indian bureaucrats. You know, the joke is that UK created bureaucracy, the Indians perfected. Yeah. and therefore, the British never have to send that many British soldiers to run the entire India.
Yes.
They let the Indian bureaucrats to run India. Unfortunately, the Japanese didn't learn this. The Japanese thought that they could use the military power to take care of China. And so for the 20th century, the whole Asia suffered tremendously because of that mindset.
Japan.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Prof. And another one is like this: what should China should be prepared and then do to overcome the superpower USA in order to manage BRI? I remember when for this question that maybe last month you mentioned, I think Joe Biden say that we need to copy the strategy of China by developing BRI, but a small one. Yeah. So the question is, what should China do to overcome USA?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
The question is, what should China do to face the USA. But actually, I think the question is wrong. I think actually USA copy the Chinese strategy right now. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things that China is doing in terms of the BRI, I think they learned a lot in the last 7 years. They learned a lot in the sense that they don't just no longer just go into another country and say that we will help you to build infrastructure. They will go in and culturally communicate with the local countries. You know, for example, when they first went into Malaysia, the Chinese workers are extreme, you know, between 2008 and 2018, China built 30,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. In other words, they now have a huge manpower of extremely high qualified, and they work very, very hard. Chinese people now work, they call it the 7 by 14, namely they work 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. And so when they have a project in Malaysia, they bring their own people in completely. They even bring the rice in so that they will eat the Chinese rice. And of course, that created a lot of animosity in Malaysia. And Malaysia felt that the local people, you know, I get nothing out of this. You come in, you build it, and then I get nothing. My life is still horrible. So what the Chinese learned in the last 7 years is that you need to train the local people. You need to make sure to bring up the quality of the local people and work side by side with them. And that's what's happening right now. And I think that maybe they have the same issues facing Indonesia. And I think that, again, China is spending a lot of effort now in trying to understand the local situation. And I think in some sense, countries like Indonesia can also offer opportunities for China to learn about the ways the Indonesian work.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Feng. And then this one is acknowledgement from the third discussion, Dr. Dimas Oki, that Professor Feng has explained briefly, very clear and very brilliant about what Indonesia can play and contribute to the world, the sharp situation between US and China recently by leading the third the alternative way by bringing the climate change agenda for the world rather than pick which side, whether USA or China. And I think just the last question, Professor Feng, and of course, as Professor Feng mentioned previously during his presentation, if all of the participants, you have any questions, you can just send an email to him,
yes,
taswan@gmail.com. And also, if
you can also buy the book and read it.
Yes. I think we already put on the flyer, Professor Feng,
okay,
that every participant, and also I think right now it's also live, Professor, at YouTube. Many people also follow from YouTube, so
that's right. That's
right. They can get a discount for that.
Yes.
Okay, for about 20%.
Yeah.
Okay, so Professor Feng, it is nice from you to deliver the speech about your insightful book, China's Millennium Transformation, the Belt and Road Initiative. And hopefully we can learn more from you. And also we will set up the meeting with our president about your idea regarding International Advisory Board.
That's right.
In order to make Lanka become it's not the next suspect or the next other thing, because you mentioned that we need to develop our own identity.
That's right.
There is no branch campus. It should be develop our own.
I call it the soul of the university.
It's the soul of university. The soul of university.
That's right.
And hopefully we can set up the meeting soon. And again, Universitas Airlangga really thank you and really honored to having you on this book launching. And hopefully your perspective and wisdoms on this book can increase our understanding and also provide some alternatives for Indonesia. What should we do for the next years to come, and also escape from the middle income trap, as China's like now do.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you once again, Professor Feng, and hopefully you will have more fruitful coming years and more books and inspiration coming from you. Once again, thank you and have a good evening, Professor Feng, and all participants, and also for the discussions, Bapak Adi Dwi Putranto, the chairman of East Java's Chamber of Commerce, and also Dr. Muhammad Miftahul Suru, our Vice Rector for Information, Digitalization, and Internationalization, as well as the special staff for Coordinating Minister of Economics, Dr. Dimas Okinugroho. Also, we want to say thank you. And of course, to all of participants who joined this book launching. Once again, thank you, and have a good day for everyone.
Well, I want to say thank you once again. I'm very honored and have the opportunity to interact with Indonesians. It's great honor for me, and I sincerely hope that what we have discussed today is beneficial to you in however minute way it is. I know that we, sometimes think that we can do a lot. Well, I'm only one human being, and I consider myself as a Southeast Asian. I grew up in Singapore. I always say that you can take me out of Southeast Asia, but you cannot take Southeast Asia out of me. So thank you very much.